A strong and growing question within the spiritual community is what happens to the people who don't evolve? Do they get left behind? So today, I'm going to explain exactly what happens to people who are not on the Ascension timeline and what exactly left behind means. When we're going through a spiritual awakening, it's very common for us to become even more sensitive and more empathetic to our environment, if we weren't already empathetic. So, of course, we care most about our loved ones and we care most about humanity being able to all experience positivity and all experience higher timelines for humanity. So naturally, we don't want to leave anyone behind. So what happens when we don't want to leave anyone behind is we start becoming very encaptured with this concept of being left behind. It starts capturing our imagination and it starts capturing our heart and soul, so that even though as we're awakening, we genuinely are growing, what ends up happening is that our consciousness starts to look at this whole concept of ascension through a very childish viewpoint. On accident, we may innocently start to remove the complexity, the maturity, and the free will of consciousness by lowering this entire concept and turning it into a rapture scenario where one group of people get to ascend and one group of people get left behind. And if we were to truly look at evolution through this black and white lens, we would be removing and stripping away all of the true maturity of consciousness, because there is no such thing as being left behind when you are given choices and you are given opportunities and you are given information. So it's not a matter of somebody was left behind. When we look at things through that paradigm, that there are people who are ascending and people who are being left behind, that is false. That is a false paradigm. There is no such thing as that paradigm. It makes us feel good about ourselves when we think that we will never leave behind others, or that all people will choose to evolve. But when we talk like this, we don't even understand what ascension truly is. Ascension is the conscious participation in our own evolution. It happens only when we have balanced and fully calibrated our mind and heart into Eros Gamos. We cannot force others to face the deep waters of this reality. We can only provide knowledge to others and even be vital catalysts that helps them along their journey. But at a soul level, a person chooses to evolve or they choose to stay behind because they are the sovereign, so no one can choose for them. The universe never leaves a soul behind. In fact, the universe does the exact opposite. The universe provides as many opportunities, assistance, and support possible to move a being into growth. When a being subconsciously chooses to continue recycling inside the third density reincarnation cycle, they will reverse the process of ascension, which will eventually allow entropy to liberate their consciousness through a catabolic process of dispersing their soul unit back into creative life force. This process is also taught inside metempsychosis. If you would like to learn more about this, you can watch my collab with After School titled The Timeline Split. So because we know that evolution and ascension leads to positive outcomes, positive timelines, we tend to look at things from a very black and white perspective. And that dumbs down the entire frequency of evolution, because we think that positive and ascension timelines are all utopian. They're all rainbows and butterflies and everything's perfect, and it's not. So even when we talk about ascension timelines through such a childish fairy tale paradigm, we're not understanding what positive timelines mean. Positive timelines for humanity still have their challenges. They still have their karma and they still have their dharma. They still have complexity and entropy, but they're more aware. So it's just a different level of challenges. They're not completely in hell realms of ignorance. So Typically, when we think that positive timelines for humanity is some form of spiritual bypassing, it's because we cannot conceive, we cannot even picture what a more healthy timeline would be. So we have to paint it like this characteristic form of a fairy tale, all because we haven't within ourselves established yet that stability within higher consciousness, or that stability within enlightenment. So because of that, we can't even picture what a person's talking about when they're talking about ascension timelines. We throw the whole thing out and just think like, oh, you guys are just disconnected utopians. So positive timelines for humanity still have challenges. They still have curriculum, but they are not controlled by the powers that were. And they are not operating under the power that were's draconian law and draconian system. So we make different choices, and those choices either lead for us to evolve or us to not evolve. There's no such thing as being left behind. That would imply that we are being abandoned, and that there were some beliefs that were correct and there were some beliefs that were wrong, and that the wrong beliefs got deserted or abandoned by a higher power or even by benevolent beings. This is all a very immature way of looking at evolution, because even people who think that they're believing in some sort of savior and that will allow them to ascend or experience some sort of evolution are still gonna just go and get recycled into the fourth density. So this isn't about beliefs, about you have to believe in this, and if you believe in that, that means you get to go to heaven, or you need to believe in this, and if you don't believe in it, now you stay left behind and experience hell. So we're all in a hell realm and a heaven realm at the same time, because the third density is multidimensional. That's why you can go to one country and experience sheer hell, or you can go to another country and experience something like heaven on earth. The third dimension in itself is one that is hell and heaven realms mixed together in the physical form. So when we talk about hell as though we're not already able to access it and live it and experience it in this dimension and in this earth, that's very innocently disconnected from other people's experiences here already in this dimension. So, hell already exists here. It's not something that we have to go to an afterlife to experience. And both heaven and hell are not dependent on a belief. If we believe in something or if we don't believe in something, will never determine if you evolve, because beliefs are a dime a dozen. They don't mean much. It's what happens to our consciousness with beliefs. Some beliefs can empower us into maturing, and when we're maturing, that's happening on a body, mind, spirit level. Beliefs can even sometimes block our own development. The question we must ask ourselves is, what is this belief making me? Part of ascension is confronting our beliefs, examining them and reducing them, as they can weigh down the soul and keep it attached to the fourth density. Beliefs are meant to help build a bridge between the mind and the heart, the physical world and the spirit. So they are abstract concepts that we are meant to make meaning behind and spiritualize. They are tools to help our body, mind, spirit shift its frequency. When we digest a belief, it is supposed to transmute into wisdom. It does not matter if we eat a belief. It only matters what we turned into once the belief was digested. So evolution and ascension are not dependent on our mind grabbing and holding on to a picture of God or grabbing and holding on to a picture of heaven. That is what the false light wants us to believe is evolution. The false light wants us to picture this concept of evolving in its most watered down, lowest frequency form. Beliefs will never be more important than what we become. So beliefs are meant to help us become more mature in our consciousness. Beliefs are meant to help us become more aware, and they're meant to help us evolve. But just believing in something doesn't mean that we will evolve or not. So we have to understand that nuance, because that's where we start thinking from the lower paradigm, that people will get left behind and others will go to a utopia. Reality is far more complex than this. In fact, not all beings will choose to reincarnate in the Earth School. Everything depends on our frequency. The more free will a being has acquired, the more options their soul stream has. They could choose to move their consciousness to a different realm altogether, while some will only ascend to a higher bandwidth of the fourth density. And still, other soul streams will liberate themselves from this entire universe. So there's many different ways that we can ascend and many different places that we go when we're talking about ascension. The closest framework to what I am describing is taught in modern times through the law of one material known as the harvest and graduation. Not all beings will graduate to a higher density, but no matter what, there will always be bodhisattvas who will assist the beings here within the third density reincarnation cycle. So many of us had a pre-birth intention to raise the collective consciousness here on Earth, so it's natural for us to want to see other people evolve, and it's even more natural for us to want everyone to stop suffering. But if a person still chooses to make unconscious choices, if a person still wants to pretend that they don't know that there is such an option, and that they didn't know that there was such a choice as to become more aware, a person is just operating from a very subconscious, fearful place, and nobody can make them evolve for them. That's why there is no such thing as a person being left behind, because being left behind would mean that a person was a child and did not have their own choices and wasn't a spiritual sovereign. And then there was another person who abandoned them as though a higher power had just left them. And that is a completely false paradigm to look at evolution through. So if a person chooses with their free will to ignore information and consistently ignore knowledge and ignore their reality, the dark nature of reality or the larger nature of reality, and if they just choose to stay within their own belief systems or their limited consciousness, no one is being left behind. So to think that all beings are going to ascend or we're not going to leave anyone behind, that thinking is coming from a person who doesn't truly understand what evolution is. We're now becoming entrapped in pictures of our mind that sound really good. We're now possessed by our own virtue and accidentally virtue signaling to all that no one's left behind. All of this is not actually how ascension works, because once again, when a person has consistently been given opportunities and choices, then no one can truly say that anyone was left behind. And whether we want to realize this or not, the universe knows that all of us are source. So there's no such thing as children. There is only us being in the egoic version of our higher self. So we're the one on the ground. We're the cute little avatar, and we have a higher self. And people have mixed that into believing that we're children, simply because we don't know everything about all of the universe, since we've committed to coming into one ego, one perspective. So we've become a singularity out of our entire fractal of our higher self and out of our entire fractal of our oversoul. And because we've chosen to come in and to have one singular perspective called an ego, we think that we're actually a child even beyond this lifetime, when in reality, everyone is a trinity. We're us, the traveling soul. We're on a journey. And then we have our higher self, who you could look at as like our future self. and our higher self is outside of space and time. And then we have our largest aspect, and that is Source. And Source never left anywhere. Source isn't on a journey. Source is in the eternal now. So our consciousness is a trinity. And when we call ourselves a child, that's cute and that's great, as long as we know that we're not actually a child that is being left behind by a higher power. That's when we should not look at ourselves as children anymore. But if we want to look at ourselves as being a child to our higher self and a child to Source, as long as we know that our consciousness is a trinity, then we can call ourselves that. We can assist others by letting them know that they are spiritually sovereign and that their choices lead to different outcomes. They have a cause and effect. So even if we don't become aware, that is a choice. And we may not know that. We may not know that we are spiritually sovereign and that no one, not even a higher power, can make us have an ascension or can make us mature our consciousness. No one can make us grow for us. We're not in a universe where there is such a thing as one person being responsible for another person. There's no such thing as one person is spiritually sovereign and the other isn't. That was an illusion. That was a spell cast on human consciousness. And when we think that one person is more spiritually sovereign than the other person, now we're in a paradigm of masters and slaves. The spell humanity is under is masters and slaves. So even if we don't know that, we still will operate from that paradigm. That's the crazy thing. We'll still accidentally come from that paradigm where we think that somebody's left behind because we don't know that deeply embedded within our programming of our psyche, we have the draconian program of masters and slaves. And when we apply that even to spiritual beliefs, even to religious beliefs, we think that one being is more responsible, is more sovereign, is more free than the other being. And that is the illusion that humanity is waking up out of. So, are there people that are left behind? To answer the question, there are people who would best be served for their soul's growth to continue playing out different lesson plans here in the third density. So it's a matter of curriculum. Would you try to make a 4-year-old have the knowledge and the maturity of a 10-year-old? No, you wouldn't. You would say, wow, that being would best have a classroom that would serve them at that stage of development. So there's no such thing as left behind. What there is are always there being different levels of maturity with different levels of lessons. So even if a person doesn't evolve, or even if a person doesn't align with a higher timeline, that does not mean that they are left behind, because this reality, the third density in this version of reality, may possibly be the best thing for their soul's evolution. It may still serve them. They may still need to grow here. So that's another reason why there's no such thing as being left behind. I hope this has helped you ascend. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.